The afternoon rain hammered against the glass windows of Corner Brew Cafe, turning the streets of downtown into rivers of gray water. Elena Rivera pushed through the heavy door, her hand gripping her son Oliver's small fingers tightly. Her canvas bag hung from her shoulder, weighted down by library books that needed returning and a lunch she never had time to eat. "Mama, I'm cold," Oliver whispered, his brown eyes looking up at her with complete trust. Elena's heart squeezed. She brushed wet hair from his forehead and forced a smile. "I know, sweetheart. We'll get warm now." The cafe was packed. Every table filled with people escaping the sudden storm, their umbrellas dripping in the corner, coats steaming slightly in the heated air. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods made Elena's stomach growl, but she ignored it. She had exactly $7.30 in her wallet, enough for 2 small hot chocolates and bus fare home. She scanned the crowded room with growing desperation. Oliver needed to sit down. He had been on his feet all day at the community center's after-school program while she finished her shift at the library. Then her eyes landed on a corner table where a man sat alone, a newspaper spread before him, a plate with half a sandwich and untouched fries pushed to the side. Elena hesitated. She hated asking for anything, hated the feeling of being seen as someone who needed help. But Oliver's hand was cold in hers, and his legs were tired. She took a breath and approached. "Excuse me," she said softly. The man looked up. Daniel Cross had been reading the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing a single word. His mind was elsewhere, tangled in board meetings and product launches and numbers that meant everything and nothing. But when he heard her voice, something made him actually see the person speaking. She was young, probably late 20s, with blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes were clean but worn, her shoes practical. The boy beside her had her eyes, curious and bright despite obvious tiredness. "Would you mind if we shared your table?" Elena asked. "Everything else is taken." Daniel glanced around, confirming what he already knew. "Of course," he said, folding his newspaper and gesturing to the empty chairs. "Please." "Thank you." Elena helped Oliver into a chair, then settled across from the stranger. She went to the counter, ordered 2 hot chocolates, and counted out exact change. The barista smiled kindly, and Elena returned it, grateful for small mercies. When she returned, Oliver was staring at the plate of food between them. Not rudely, not demandingly, just with the quiet longing of a child who understands that wanting something doesn't mean you can have it. Daniel noticed. He pushed the plate slightly toward the center of the table, but Oliver didn't reach for it. The boy had been taught manners, taught restraint. That impressed Daniel more than he expected. Elena saw the exchange and felt heat rise to her cheeks. She leaned close to Oliver. "Don't stare, honey," she whispered. But Oliver whispered back, just loud enough for Daniel to hear. "Is he going to eat that, Mama?" Elena closed her eyes briefly. Then she straightened her shoulders, looked directly at Daniel, and did something that took more courage than most people would understand. "I'm sorry to ask this," she said, her voice steady despite the embarrassment burning in her chest. "But would you mind if we shared your leftovers? I can pay you for them. I just didn't budget enough for food today, and he hasn't eaten since lunch." Daniel set down his coffee cup slowly. He studied her face, seeing not desperation but determination. She wasn't begging. She was negotiating, offering to pay, maintaining her dignity even in a vulnerable moment. "You don't need to pay me," Daniel said quietly. He slid the plate fully toward them. "I wasn't that hungry anyway." "I insist," Elena said, already reaching for her wallet. "Then insist all you want," Daniel replied with a small smile. "But I'm not taking your money. Consider it already paid for." Oliver looked at his mother for permission. Elena nodded, and the boy carefully picked up half the sandwich, taking a small, grateful bite. His whole face lit up. "What do you say?" Elena prompted gently. Thank you, sir, Oliver said clearly. You're very kind. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. You're welcome. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Oliver, with the fearless curiosity of children, asked, Do you work in a big building? Daniel smiled. Sometimes. Do you like big buildings? I like the library best, Oliver said seriously. Mama works there. She reads me stories every night. Does she? Daniel glanced at Elena, who was watching her son with such open love that it made Daniel ache for reasons he couldn't name. She does all the voices, Oliver continued proudly. Even the dragon voice. That sounds impressive, Daniel said. Elena laughed softly, the sound surprising her. It's really just me growling. Not very professional. I think it sounds perfect, Daniel said, and meant it. They talked for 20 minutes. Daniel learned that Elena worked part-time at the public library, that she was studying online for a degree in education, that Oliver loved dinosaurs and astronomy and wanted to be a paleontologist who works in space. Elena learned that the stranger was patient, genuinely interested, and asked questions that showed he was really listening. What Elena didn't learn was that Daniel Cross owned the tech company whose headquarters dominated the downtown skyline, that his net worth was calculated in billions, or that this simple conversation over shared leftovers would change both their lives forever. When the rain finally stopped, Elena gathered their things. Thank you again, she said sincerely. This kindness won't be forgotten. Daniel nodded, watching them leave, Oliver's small hand tucked safely in his mother's. Through the window, he saw Elena pause to let Oliver jump in a puddle, laughing despite having no umbrella, no car, nothing but each other. And Daniel realized he had just met the richest person he had ever known. The sky hung heavy and dark 3 days later, threatening another storm. Daniel sat in his car parked along Riverside Avenue, finishing a conference call with his legal team in Singapore. The conversation droned on about patents and market projections, but his attention kept drifting to the street outside. He had driven this route twice since the cafe encounter, though he would not admit to himself why. Perhaps it was the library nearby, or perhaps something else entirely. The call ended, and he sat in silence, watching raindrops begin their descent. Then he saw them. Across the street at the bus shelter, Elena stood with Oliver pressed against her side. The boy wore a thin jacket, clearly insufficient for the weather turning cold. Elena had no umbrella, no proper coat, just a cardigan that was already darkening with moisture. Daniel's hand moved to the door handle. He could offer them a ride, help them somehow. But something stopped him. He remembered the way Elena had insisted on paying for the food, the careful pride in her voice. If he approached now, in his expensive car, offering charity, she might see it as pity. She might feel diminished. So he watched, unable to look away. The rain intensified, coming down in sheets. Elena immediately moved into action. She pulled her cardigan off despite the cold and wrapped it around Oliver's shoulders. Then she dug through her worn backpack and produced a plastic shopping bag, the kind given free at grocery stores. Daniel leaned forward, wondering what she was doing. Elena gently placed the plastic bag over Oliver's head like a makeshift rain hat, tucking it carefully around his ears. It looked ridiculous and beautiful at the same time. Oliver giggled, reaching up to touch the crinkling plastic, and Elena smiled despite shivering in just her thin shirt. But she was not done. She unwound her only scarf from around her neck and wrapped it twice around Oliver, then pulled him close, using her own body as a shield against the wind. Water ran down her face, her hair plastered to her head, her clothes soaking through. She was freezing, clearly uncomfortable, but every action was focused on keeping her son warm and dry. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had seen charitable donations, had written checks that funded entire wings of hospitals, had been praised for his generosity. But he had never witnessed sacrifice like this. Raw, immediate, without audience or recognition. Just a mother's love made visible. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes and spray of water. Elena guided Oliver up the steps, and Daniel made a split-second decision. He left his car, crossed the street, and boarded the same bus, dropping coins into the fare box and moving to a seat near the back. Elena had not seen him. She was focused entirely on Oliver, settling him by the window and rubbing his small hands between hers to warm them. The bus lurched forward into traffic, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. Daniel watched from several rows back, collar turned up, feeling oddly like a spy. But he could not stop watching. The bus was mostly empty, just a few tired workers heading home, an elderly woman with shopping bags, a teenager with headphones. The windows fogged with breath and warmth, creating a cocoon separate from the gray world outside. Elena was still shivering, her arms wrapped around herself, but she kept smiling at Oliver, kept talking to him in a low, soothing voice that Daniel strained to hear. Then she did something that made Daniel's heart stop completely. Elena raised one hand and formed a shape with her fingers. Thumb tucked in, two fingers extended upward, pinky and ring finger curled. A rabbit. She held it up to the window where the streetlights outside cast its shadow on the foggy glass. "Look, Oliver," she whispered. "Mr. Rabbit is hopping through the rain." She moved her hand gently, making the shadow dance. Oliver's tired face transformed with delight. He tried to copy the shape with his own small fingers, tongue poking out in concentration. "Now he's jumping over puddles," Elena continued, her voice warm despite her shaking. "Can you make him jump?" Oliver giggled and made his shadow rabbit jump. Elena made hers hop alongside, and together they created a small theater on the fogged window, mother and son, turning a cold, wet bus ride into magic. Daniel sat frozen, something cracking open inside his chest. Here was a woman who had nothing, not even a proper coat, yet she created wonder from shadows and whispers. She transformed hardship into adventure, gave her son memories instead of complaints, taught him that joy did not require money or comfort, just imagination and love. How does she do it, Daniel wondered. How does she have so little and give so much? He thought of his own childhood, raised by nannies and boarding schools while his parents built their fortune. He thought of every toy he had owned, every expensive gift, and could not remember a single moment that matched the simple beauty of shadow puppets on a bus window. The bus stopped at Oakland Street. Elena gathered Oliver, who was now half asleep, and lifted him onto her back. The plastic bag still covered his head, and she adjusted it carefully before standing. Her legs were unsteady, her clothes dripping, but she held her son securely and stepped off into the drizzle. Daniel remained seated. He watched through the window as she walked down the sidewalk, Oliver's arms wrapped around her neck, his head resting on her shoulder. A streetlight illuminated them briefly, casting their shadows long and intertwined on the wet pavement. Then they turned a corner and disappeared. Daniel sat on the bus for 2 more stops before getting off and walking back to his car in the rain. He did not mind getting wet. He barely noticed. His mind was full of plastic bags and shadow rabbits and a woman's quiet strength. He had spent his entire life building an empire, accumulating wealth, chasing success. But tonight, on a rainy bus, he had witnessed something he had never truly understood before. Real wealth was not what you owned. It was what you could give when you had nothing left to give. It was creating light in darkness, warmth in cold, magic in mundane moments. It was loving someone so completely that their comfort mattered more than your own. Elena had taught him that without saying a single word. Daniel drove home to his penthouse apartment, 30 floors above the city, surrounded by expensive art and floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood looking out at the lights below, thinking about a woman and a boy in a small apartment somewhere in those streets, probably sharing a simple dinner, probably laughing about their adventure. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Cross felt truly poor. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. I need you to find out everything you can about the community programs at the Riverside Public Library, he said. Funding, needs, everything. Right now, sir? It's almost 9. Yes, now. Because Daniel had learned something tonight. Sometimes the greatest investment you can make is not in stocks or real estate or technology. Sometimes it is in people who remind you what being human actually means. He would find a way to help without taking away her dignity. He would find a way to honor what she had taught him. The rain continued outside, washing the city clean, and Daniel stood at his window, thinking of shadow rabbits and a mother's love, feeling something he had not felt in years. He felt grateful. The Riverside Public Library occupied a modest brick building tucked between a pharmacy and a small grocery store. Daniel pushed through the heavy doors on a Thursday afternoon, surprising himself with his own nervousness. He had addressed shareholders, negotiated with world leaders, closed billion-dollar deals, yet walking into this small library made his palms sweat. He had spent the past week learning everything he could about the library's situation. The building was old, the funding inadequate, the children's program running entirely on volunteer efforts. And Elena worked here 3 days a week, shelving books and running the story hour for neighborhood kids. Inside, the library was quiet and warm. Worn carpet, fluorescent lights, walls lined with donated books in various states of repair. A few elderly patrons read newspapers. A teenager typed on a public computer. And in the far corner, past the reference desk, Daniel saw her. Elena sat at a low table surrounded by 5 children, all under 10 years old. But she was not reading to them. She was drawing. Daniel moved closer, staying partially hidden behind a tall shelf of encyclopedias. He watched as Elena sketched quickly on large sheets of paper, her hand moving with confident strokes. The children leaned in, fascinated, as a story emerged under her pencil. And then, Elena said, her voice animated, the little girl realized the rain was not something to fear. It was an adventure waiting to happen. She drew a child jumping in a puddle, arms spread wide, joy captured in simple lines. The children gasped with delight. "Can you draw my dog?" one little girl asked. "Tell me about your dog," Elena replied, flipping to a fresh page. As the child described her pet, Elena drew, and Daniel watched in amazement as a scruffy terrier took shape on the paper, full of personality and life. The sketch was good. Really good. Not amateur doodles but genuine artistic talent. When story hour ended and the children reluctantly left with their parents, Elena began gathering her materials. That was when she noticed Daniel standing there. Her eyes widened. Daniel? He had not told her his name at the cafe, but she had clearly learned it somehow. Small towns had ways of sharing information, especially about strangers who stood out. "I hope I'm not intruding," Daniel said, stepping forward. "I was nearby and remembered you mentioned working here." Elena stood, brushing eraser shavings from her jeans. "No, it's fine. I'm just surprised." She paused. "I heard who you are. After the cafe. Someone recognized you." Daniel nodded slowly. "Does that change anything? Should it?" Elena asked simply. "Most people think it should." "Well, you were kind before I knew, and you're the same person now," Elena said. "Money doesn't change that." Her directness was refreshing. Daniel gestured to the drawings scattered on the table. "These are remarkable. Did you study art?" Elena laughed, a slightly bitter sound. "For 1 semester before Oliver came along. Life had other plans." She began stacking the papers. "I draw for the kids sometimes. Keeps them engaged." "May I?" Daniel asked, reaching for the stack. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Daniel looked through the drawings carefully. They told stories. A mother and child walking under an umbrella made of stars. A small apartment with warm light pouring from its windows. A boy riding a bus that transformed into a dragon. Each image was simple but emotionally powerful, capturing moments of hope and wonder. Elena, these could be published, Daniel said seriously. Have you ever considered creating a children's book? She smiled sadly and took the drawings back. I tried once. Sent proposals to publishers. Got very polite rejection letters. She shrugged. It's okay. Some dreams are meant to stay dreams. What if they didn't have to? Elena looked at him warily. Daniel, if this is about helping me because you feel sorry for me. It's not, he interrupted. I'm serious. These drawings tell stories that children need to see. Stories about finding magic in ordinary moments, about love and resilience. That has value. I appreciate that, but the library is facing budget cuts, Daniel said, changing direction. I looked into it. There's talk of closing the children's wing entirely. Elena's face fell. How did you know that? It's public record. The city council meeting notes are online. Daniel leaned against the table. What if there was funding to keep it open? To expand it, even? That would be wonderful, but where would that funding come from? Elena asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. I could help. No. Elena's voice was firm. I don't accept charity, Daniel. I told you that at the cafe. This isn't charity. This is investment. In the community, in children's literacy, in programs that matter. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed her a document. I have a foundation that funds educational initiatives. The library qualifies. Elena studied the screen, her expression torn between hope and pride. I don't know. There's more, Daniel said carefully. My publishing contacts are always looking for new voices. If you would let me show them your work, no promises, but a real chance. You would be published on merit, not as a favor. Why are you doing this? Elena asked quietly. Daniel thought about the rain, the bus, the shadow puppets. He thought about how this woman had taught him more in 3 brief encounters than decades of success had shown him. Because you reminded me what actually matters, he said honestly. Because watching you create magic for your son with nothing but a plastic bag in your imagination showed me what real wealth looks like. Because talent and kindness should not go unrewarded just because someone is struggling. Elena's eyes glistened. I'm not a charity case. I know. You're one of the strongest people I have ever met. Which is exactly why I am offering opportunities, not handouts. What you do with them is entirely up to you. She was quiet for a long moment, absently tracing the edge of one of her drawings. Finally, she looked up. If I do this, if I accept help with the library and try the publishing route, I pay it forward. When I'm on my feet, I help someone else. I would expect nothing less, Daniel said with a smile. 3 months later, the Riverside Public Library held a grand reopening celebration. New computers lined updated tables. Fresh paint brightened the walls. The children's wing had doubled in size, with comfortable reading nooks and an art corner stocked with supplies. And in the front window, displayed on an easel, stood the first copy of The Plastic Bag Princess, written and illustrated by Elena Rivera. The book told the story of a mother and child's rainy day adventure, finding joy in simple moments. It was dedicated to Oliver, who taught me that love is the only umbrella we ever really need. Daniel stood in the back of the crowded room during the book launch party, watching Elena read to a group of mesmerized children. Oliver sat in the front row, beaming with pride at his mother. A reporter approached Daniel. Mr. Cross, your foundation's donation saved this library. What inspired your generosity? Daniel smiled, watching Elena turn a page and make all the children laugh. Someone once shared their leftovers with me, he said. I am just returning the favor. The reporter looked confused, but Daniel did not elaborate. Some things did not need explanation. After the reading, Elena made her way through the crowd to where Daniel stood. "Thank you," she said simply. "For believing in me." "Thank you," Daniel replied, "for teaching me what wealth actually means." Oliver ran up and grabbed Daniel's hand. "Did you like Mama's book?" "I loved it," Daniel said sincerely. "It is my favorite book ever written." As the celebration continued around them, Elena and Daniel stood together, no longer strangers, not quite friends, but two people who had changed each other's lives in ways that money could never measure. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light through the library windows, illuminating the books and the laughter and the promise of new beginnings. And somewhere in the city, another person was having a hard day, another child was going hungry, another dreamer was about to give up hope. But because of what started with shared leftovers in a small cafe, because of one woman's dignity and one man's awakening, the world was becoming a slightly kinder place. One story, one gesture, one moment of connection at a time.